As we closed in the last lesson we did in Genesis chapter 30, we still are. Well, Laban was so desperate in keeping Jacob because he got filthy rich almost overnight as soon as Jacob arrived on the scene. And he was so desperate to keep him, he said, "What shall I give you to stay?" Well, we'll continue that story today and find out what Jacob's answer was. Starting in verse 31 and ending in verse 36. And Jacob said, "Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock." He has a proposal for him. "I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted cattle and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and all the brown cattle, and if such shall be my hire." What did he just say? Yes, all the off-colored ones, multicolored ones, speckled, spotted, whatever, striped, shall be his hire. But he's making it difficult. He says, "I'm going to take all the spotted and off-colored," but let's continue. "So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep," in other words, white sheep, "that shall be counted stolen with me." Well, we'll unpack this. And Laban said, "Behold, make it so. Make it according to thy word." And he removed, Laban did, he removed that day all the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep. So you only had white sheep. And gave them unto the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Well, let's unpack this. Did you know Laban had received 14 years of free labor from Jacob and had prospered greatly as a result? We mentioned that. And to try to prevent him from leaving, he asked Jacob what he could pay so that he wouldn't leave. "What shall I give thee?" Now Jacob responded with a proposal, which Laban quickly accepted, because Laban recognized it as very beneficial for himself. This is what Jacob said: "Thou shalt not give me anything. If you will do what I'm asking you to do, I will again feed and keep your flock." Now, I had to read through this several times before I could understand what was going on. Jacob would continue feeding and caring for Laban's flock like before, but in the understanding that his wages would be all the spotted and off-colored animals which the flocks might produce in the future. But before they could do that, all such animals in the existing flocks were removed so they could not be used in breeding, so that Jacob couldn't claim them as his own. Therefore, Jacob would only get the off-colored and speckled animals which might be born from a flock containing only solid-colored and dominant-colored animals, such as white sheep, brown goats. These terms, apart from God's intervention, if God didn't interfere, would have enormously favored Laban. Isn't that right? Jacob, however, knew from long experience as a shepherd and stock breeder that some potential for some multicolored animals would be in the flock, even though all appeared to be single and solid colored. The result would be that at least a few animals would be born spotted and speckled, right? Even from Laban's solid-colored animals. Jacob trusted the Lord to determine how many. According to verse 33, he said, "So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come. When it shall come for my ire before your face, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep," they have to be white sheep, "that shall be counted stolen with me." In other words, any brown sheep would be his, but every white sheep would still be Laban's. And if Jacob claimed it, it would be stolen. Any single-colored animals, like solid-colored animals, would belong to Laban. And that's what he started with. I'm fairly certain Laban laughed at this ridiculous sounding condition for Jacob staying. But he agreed to it. What he said was, "Behold, I would it might be according to thy word." Now, what did we say whenever Moses wrote, "Behold"? This was another wow moment. Laban probably said, "Wow, that is stupid. But that's okay. I'm going to go along with it." And to make sure that Jacob wouldn't back out of the deal, he and his sons removed all striped, spotted, or speckled livestock and took them a 3 days' journey away so Jacob couldn't cheat. The remainder of Laban's flocks were still under Jacob's care. So, Jacob was resolved to be entirely dependent on God's provision for his hire, for his wages. "And my righteousness shall answer for me," he said. You see, there was no need of branding or other means of identification in the flocks that Jacob took care of. The colors would determine at once whose animal it was. So, let's close with this. According to the conditions Jacob set for his wages, Jacob was faced with a seemingly disastrous position, a seemingly impossible position. Knowing that he would not depend on his scrupulous father-in-law, he had learned through his service that he could only depend on God. Have you learned to do that? Sometimes we come to depend on God as our last resort. All of us, me included, need to depend on God as our only resort. Or we need to learn to do so.